On est tout bon. On est tout bon, on est tout bon.
Hey, que j'étais un peu trop près du... C'est parti. Hey everyone, welcome back to Excuse My SaaS, the podcast brought to you by ProdCamp, the only user feedback platform with an ROI. I'm Matei, your host, and today we're getting into a very important question: how B2B SaaS companies can level up their game by combining the power of product data and user feedback to drive growth. Our today's guest, Enzo Avigo, is the brain behind June.so, a Y Combinator-backed company. Enzo got some serious street cred as a former product manager at Intercom, right, Enzo? And
Correct.
now he's leading June.so, a cutting-edge product analytic platform. Their goal, helping B2B SaaS companies make sense of all that product data and turn it into something that actually boosts the bottom line. Something we feel we're very much a part of at Prodcam too. So if you try to make sense of how you can make your product grow with the insight your users are churning out, stick around and let's jump right into it. Hello, Enzo. Did I miss anything?
Hey, Matty. No, you missed nothing. Maybe one correction is, and we're going to talk about that in a second. You described us as a product analytics company. I think we started like that, but I think the company has evolved into something a bit broader. So we typically are describe ourselves as a next gen analytics for B2B SaaS, and definitely one of the core feature we offer is product analytics. But like we're going to talk about ROI today. It's very hard to justify your ROI as a product analytics. Like maybe you influence someone's decision, and then further down the line, 6 months, the thing that you influence has brought some outcome, and you were at the source of the ROI. But I think ultimately what we've been after is helping our customers get very clear and very short time frame ROI. So we've been building a lot. Other than that, it's very correct. Thanks for the intro.
Love it. Great. So let's jump straight into it then. Enzo, you've been working with hundreds of B2B companies. Uh, what's the big challenge they face when it comes to figuring out how the user engage with their product? And also maybe how is that different from what B2C company usually experience?
100%. Yeah. So let's talk about the problem of like understanding what people do, and then we can talk about the difference between B2B and B2C. So the surprising thing about this problem of like not knowing what your customers do is, and this really was a surprise when we started June, is that it's really an ongoing problem. So startups that have little resources or expertise in the domain will typically not be able to do it. And interestingly enough, if you go to a large company like Intercom and you ask a PM who are the five top customers and what are the main features they use, most of the time you will get no answers. Like people don't know that. So it's quite crazy to see that even though we're in 2024, we have like all these amazing tools out there. It's still kind of a black box, right? And so I would say this is a problem we've been after in the early days of June, and we thought we would fix it quickly and then expand to tangential problems like any company, and solve many other cases. Turned out that every time we grow with our market or else, we find out that this core initial problem is actually not entirely solved. And the reason is because there are many ways to understand that, like how, like the question of like what do people do is very different in early stage, in market, in large enterprises. In the beginning, you may have just a couple of users and a couple of features. Then you have like business units and product teams with multiple features they own, things like that. And then like you have ICPs and different personas, and like you have VIP customers like the rest. You may have multiple motions like self-serve, iTouch. So how do you prioritize them? How do you look into them? Then you might have a product with multiple seats. Maybe you have a workspace admin and then a user, or maybe a technical person to set it up. Like this thing is like just very, very exponential. And so we've been going after this problem, and that's why it's really not fully solved. In terms of the difference between B2B and B2C, I think the main learning we've got is that in B2C, this topic of understanding what people do is very much a topic of volume and optimization. Let's say you have thousands of people signing up to your mobile app every day. If you get an increase by 0.5% the activation rate, this will have a huge impact on your bottom line. But for B2B, it's very different. It's very much about the operation. So if you have one customer that sign up with a very strategic lead, and you're able to identify this person and work with that person towards success, this can have a drastically impact on your revenue. And one example I love to give is the one of Slack. Slack, as they did their S1, which was their incorporation, kind of like their public launch in the US. They had to share some numbers about their customers. At the time, which was a couple of years ago, they shared that they had 600,000 customers, and also that 40% of their revenue, 40, is coming from less than 1% of their users.
Oh, wow.
And these are like 575 customers spending more than 100K a year. So in B2B, and this is really where we specialize and where I have the most, I would say, learning and insight for today. In B2B, you probably don't care too much about how many times a button is being clicked, even though this is like just like very abusive expression. What you really care about is whether an account is becoming successful with you, and product data, product usage data, is one of the signals you can leverage to figure this out. And this is where what we've been working on in the last couple of years.
Love it. It's really interesting. Thank you for shedding some light on that. Jumping, diving a bit deeper into June. I think I've seen. I'm not sure if it's on your website or in your personal profile, but I've seen a tagline of June saying something like "Turn your product data into revenue."
Yeah.
So I was curious, what does that really mean in the context of what June does today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's my tagline on the LinkedIn profile. I'm not a huge fan of it. Like I get some pushback from people saying like, what does it mean? Right. So I think I should probably iterate on it. I think the underlying message I'm trying to convey is this idea that product data is not just something to make a decision in the product team, but that it's actually a signal, again, that you can use to generate direct revenue. So I'll give a very simple framework like the AAR framework. If you look at it and you look at the typical milestones of the journey from acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, all these steps can be powered through product data and ultimately have an impact on the revenue. So I'll give you a quick example on acquisition. Knowing what channels bring the best customers is just a way to then, understand where you should put your go-to-market effort. And it's literally a way to save money on the wrong channels or just increase, your number of leads and ultimately your revenue. And to do that, you need to, of course, know where people are coming from, but you also need to tie that with your product data to understand, if these people retain, if these people are spending money with you, if these people are expanding, maybe if you look at net dollar retention, and if they're satisfied, right? Because they might spend money with you, but just be very unhappy. So that's only for the acquisition, and we could go super deep. On the activation, I think it's a very obvious one. There've been like so much writings about how product data can help you on the activation, but find out where your best customers or future best customers are stuck to unblock them is something with that product data can help you in. So just, figuring out the milestones of your product and just being able to say that account is a ICP account, a VIP account, and they're stuck on step 2, and we should absolutely do something to move them away from that is an obvious thing that a lot of our customers are doing. And it's directly impacting your revenue, right? Retention is another obvious one. If you can find out signals of people disengaging before it's too late, you're just gonna fix improve your retention, and retention is also directly impacting your revenue. Referral is something I'm not gonna talk about too much today because I think in B2B SaaS it really depends on your business model.
Right.
But then the last piece is revenue of this framework, and then it's about expansion, renewals, conversion, knowing who is ready to convert and helping that person convert, who's ready to expand or willing to expand, maybe interacting with your paywalls in your product, or is a very power user of your app and is likely to get more value from like the other things you've built and that you can monetize on, or the renewals, making sure that people like, a couple of weeks before they come to renewals are engaged and kind of like will move forward with you for another year or a couple of years. These are just very, very obvious ways that product can help you in your journey. One maybe big disclaimer is that for most of the things I mentioned, it kind of means one thing, which is that your product is at the core of your business. So just like that things I just mentioned is only true if using on an ongoing basis your product is a core driver of your revenue or success as a company. So it doesn't apply to set and forget products like some API products or payment gateway where, once you use Stripe, you don't even need to open Stripe to be an active user and a successful user. It also doesn't really apply to enterprise, very enterprise SaaS in my experience, because like I was talking with Pigment, for instance, Pigment.com, which is a FP&A SaaS. They basically have CS agents that have on average 10 customers, and they're just super close to them. So they don't need something like June to understand what people do. They just have the conversation, which is probably even better than using a product like ours, right? So there's typically a bell curve where like if you're like on the one hand, your product doesn't need really much usage, you won't correlate directly. Then there is the other end, which is probably the enterprise market, and everything in between. Like any tech company, any SaaS that has a product, engineers is building around it and kind of like expects people to derivate value from the product, then can fit into this tagline, which again is not perfect, about product data being a proxy of your revenue in a way.
That leaves quite a few companies for your market, so that should be fine. Quick follow-up question about this. Are you, in your experience, are companies always clear on the type of signals they should track and look at, or is it something you are working with them in order to figure out?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends. So my experience is that it has very little to do with the maturity of the company. Some early stage companies are very well equipped on that because, maybe one of the founders used to work in a large CS team or as a revenue operation person and is like very aware, and like from the get-go, they will get the perfect setup. While some very late stage companies like Series B, Series C still don't have anything, right? So this is it's almost like a maturity, level, like as a human, you might be 50 years old, but you're not mature, or you might meet a teenager who's like 16 and is like mature, right? Like that has very little to do. So it's a bit an unfair game here, and it depends a bit on the businesses. My experience though is that there is almost always a way to elevate where you're from, where you started. So for beginners in this domain, I think we're trying to put a lot of content out there. We're trying to help them understand the basics. The basics for a product is very easy. It's basically your understanding who logs in your product, who sign up. And then if you have like 5 core features, just being able to track your 5 core features. So if you have like a navigation tree in your SaaS on the top or on the left, like linear, just being able to know which people enters which section of your product, only that can get you so far. So, people tend to like go in very micro optimization, do all kind of funnels, try to understand where people click and so on. Honestly, if you have like a couple of directions that people can take in your product, like your 3 core features, your settings, and then your login, only tracking that and having this coarse grain view is extremely powerful. I would argue that up to Series A, it's probably the only thing you need. And I think a lot of companies have been selling like funnels and all this kind of like ways to micro optimize to B2B SaaS. But again, I think they're anti-patterns. I think if you fall into that, you're falling into optimization. And until you're Series A, let's say, it's like really not what we should be looking at. And then after that, Series B plus, I think it becomes like kind of a little bit of a maze. So what you want to do is you probably want to get a slightly more fine-grained understanding of your product usage, but keep things very organized. So make sure people know what you're talking about when you instrumented part of your product, things like that. And it's an ongoing challenge. Like we talk, for instance, about the activation. One common way we advise people to track their activation is with this concept of milestones. So what are the critical steps that people do in the product to be successful? This is something changing all the time. As you build up your product, as you add things, as you evolve your persona, maybe the market segment you're into, this very concept of milestones and activation will evolve, or you might actually have multiple of them, right? Like maybe the admin is going to go through a different set of milestones than the first person invited, right? And so I think the problem become a bit exponential. And so here, I think keeping a lot of clarity, a lot of simplicity, is ultimately what works the best, and what we've been advising very, very hard on social and so on.
Love it. Love it. Love the simple approach, not simplistic, but simple.
Simple. Yeah. It's funny. We say that all the time. Simple, but
Right.
simplistic. Yeah.
I love that one too. Thank you, Enzo. So at ProdCamp, we're also helping companies turn user feedback into revenue, and we often see business struggling to kind of identify trends in scattered feedback. In your view, how important is it for businesses to have both feedback and data working together? I feel this is the only way to walk on our 2 feet, but what can go wrong when they don't? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. I think first of all, I think data is something very broad. I think people tend to think about data as quantitative data, so things like June with dashboards. But I think data is literally any point you can collect and aggregate, and maybe anything you can put in a spreadsheet with lines is pretty data, right? So quantitative data with like user feedback, or qualitative data are things you need to articulate to ultimately make decisions. I think the combo of like quantitative and qualitative is just needed. I think in today's world, it's very hard to live without both, and I think they will bring you very different things. So the way I like to think about them is, I think often quantitative data is a signal from which you can start, like activation is bad, or conversion is bad, or retention is bad. Like it's a starting point. You're like, okay, something brings your eyes, somewhere, and you're like, I need to zoom into that. And then I think upon time, when you find out that there's a problem and you need to qualify it, and this is where qualitative feedback is the most important. Like, why are people not doing that? Or why are people keep coming back to this part of my product, right? Or people are stuck between 2 milestones. Why are they stuck? And if you don't talk with people, if you don't do user calls or collect the feedback, I think you can't really figure this out. So I think they're very complementary. I think once you build your hypothesis on like what hasn't worked and you try to fix it, I think then you can go back to your quantitative data to figure out if things have worked. Because the beauty of quantitative data is really that it's probably the only way that the brain can process such a large amount of data. It's a summary, it's a number, it's a curve, it's a line, it's a bar chart. Like, this is beautiful. Like my co-founder got very obsessed with the evolution of data visualization. He bought that book of like how we used to visualize data in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And it's insane because we had invented ways that don't exist anymore, but they made a lot of sense. You look at them, you're like, oh, wow, why do we have pie charts? Why don't we have that? And, ultimately there is a reason for that. There is a reason, like there was a convergence of humans out there that believe that way of visualizing information was the easiest for the brain to understand, to read. And I think this is where it's strong. But data can be much broader than that. Like we talk about the 2 type of data that ProdCamp and June are processing. I think there is more than that. I think there is the world right now. The world of SaaS is like drastically changing. You need to be able to process financial data, structural data. I think this is super important. I think some of the founders and the startups that are the most successful out there are able to understand macroeconomy and the changes. We certainly are super late to that. I'm kind of realizing very recently that when there is a really big crisis in the tech scene, and that most of our customers were startups, this is gonna have an impact on us. Like it took probably me like 12 months to understand that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We had the same situation. So I think that it took everyone some time to realize what was going on.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. We'll drop the link for the book you mentioned in the description of the phone.
I'll send it your way.
So June is all about product data, even if it's more than that, it's not just data, tracking how people actually use the product and turning that into revenue-driven insights. So in your experience, what types of data help B2B SaaS companies make better decisions, and what should they focus on?
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot. We started to touch on that. So
Yeah,
I think it depends on the nature of your business. Going back to the first conversation we had, the first point, if you are building a product-centered company, then product data is going to be very important because it's going to be a good proxy of the value that people get from your business, right? If you're building like a high-touch product, a high-touch company, very heavily, indexed on services, then, the satisfaction of your services is super important. So NPS, CSAT, how was the conversation, good, bad, neutral, things like that, I think is going to be super important. Feedback, we talk about it, like just being able to process this information, get close to your customer. I think at the end of the day, it's probably the most important type of data you can get. Like no matter your scale, you need to get color on what people want and what people mean when they say the things they want, right? And this is the one thing I think you cannot cut, and you can mix it with the other types of data. So I think really, like, I've been thinking about this topic of data because, like for June, for instance, it's a question like, what kind of data do we connect to June? Like today it's product data. We have a bit of marketing data because people put June on their website. It's just a snippet you can put on your website. People do that typically for website conversion rate. Now we're trying to give them like the source of the sign up, which they seem to be very excited about, which is not product data, it's marketing data.
Yeah.
Some people have asked us about revenue data. Can you connect to Stripe? So then you can do like, net dollar retention. I want to cross my revenue information with my, billing information. I can't do that without a BI tool. Well, probably that makes sense to do it with June at some point. So I've been thinking a lot about like what kind of data we process or we don't. And I think the long story short is like people want to cross a very large set of data ultimately. But this brings to another question, which is another reality. And I think this is super relevant for you and I, which is as a business, as a SaaS, can you actually process all this data and build a coherent product, right? So
yeah, and keep it simple, right?
and keep it
Yeah.
simple, and keep it identifiable in people's mind. Like June
Yeah.
is your hub for product data. It's a concept which is pretty easy to remember, right? ProdCamp is it's a product to capture your feedback data and act on it. It's a pretty easy concept, right?
Yeah.
But then if you do something like June is like a product activity data platform where you can also tie the feedback to it and the revenue value of this feedback by connecting to a billing system, that becomes a little bit more complex for people.
A bit longer story, right? Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's the trade-off for, I think it's like one of the hard trade-off for companies like ours to understand, what is the slice of the market? What is the slice of the data that you want really to occupy? And whether it makes sense for people's mind to be that, to own this part of the mind, basically.
Right, and some people actually are telling us that we went for ProdCamp a bit too far on some instances. For example, we have a prioritization module on top of the user feedback collection that actually helps you, in identifying trends and maybe identify even revenue potential affected by a feature. And some of our customers are like, oh, this is already adding a layer of complexity.
This is for prioritization product, yeah. Like now you're trying to
It's not a prioritization product. I'm doing prioritization as well.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I think the one thing which is interesting with like analytics and quantitative data like we do is that it really feels something very different and really hard to crack. And so typically, like even the very large businesses don't enter into that. So I'll give you an example, and I think we're going to talk about that in a second. We're integrating very deeply with CRMs. And I think CRMs have like no plan to go into our space because like handling data visualization at scale in a way that makes sense is just a very hard job, something that I don't think they want to do anytime soon. Or talking about roadmap, we talked with a couple of like roadmap platforms that wanted to bring back usage data. Like they're used by PMs. Like why wouldn't like these leading roadmap tools not handle analytics? They really don't want to do that. Like it's just like a completely different job. So they just want to provide an API and you to connect to it and that's it, right? So I think the lines are very interesting here.
Yeah. And where's the border? Where's the frontier? Yeah. Real quick, what could go wrong when team use data to make project decision? Are there any common mistake, pitfalls you've seen that team should avoid?
Right. So in a perfect world, if they use all the right data at the right moment, nothing should go wrong, which is of course not the case. In reality, I think the main challenge I've seen is people falling back to the data they're the most comfortable with. So product people or former product managers like me would typically fall back on product usage data because, they know how to look into it and it feels good and you don't need to talk to people, which is the hardest thing. No one, like humans have such a hard time talking to other humans. It's like the thing that brings you back to your most vulnerable version of yourself, right? Designers will fall back on the opposite. They will fall back on research. They will meet people, go super deep, but then they would just oftentimes have a very hard time to aggregate these learnings and extract like a direction and a signal. Oftentimes they would say like, I met 5 customers. This is what I've seen, and then good luck making a decision. So
that's it.
they will blast you, which is of course normal because it's their job, right? In a way, I think consultant, man, I have so many friends that used to be consultant that started a startup. These guys are filling slides like you've never seen. Like they will rely on market data so much, like with like SWOT analysis and things like that. And you're like, wow, what's such an interesting way, to build a startup. And just sometimes it works. Like that's the crazy part. Sometimes being, the product person biased on product data works. Sometimes being the former consultant, working on market data, public market data works. So I think at the end of the day, it's a balance, like everything. You need to find the right balance. And I think for the nature of the questions you have, what kind of data will be better than the other? So if you want to know what people don't tell you, check product data because product data doesn't lie. If you want to know very, very deeply the motivation of people doing something or not doing something, don't check product data. Like do research. If you want to know if overall the direction you're going into has a chance to become, a category leader, check market data. Like otherwise you're just going to go in the same direction than anyone else.
Yeah, so and talking to 10 people won't cut it, for sure.
And for sure. And 10 people won't cut it. Even though like talking to people one more time is the ultimate truth. Wherever you go, we share a manifesto today on our website, June.so/success. And we explain that really the best companies, even the later stage ones, still manage to keep a direct connection flows with their customers. So we gave 2 examples. Stripe, even when they launch a new feature today, they will spin up shared Slack channels with 10 customers and they won't release to everyone until the 10 customers are extremely happy. So no matter the scale and the thousands of customers they have, they will still launch by talking to 10 people that they have identified as like, the perfect representation of their market. The other one, which I'm really mind blown about, is Alex from Deal. So Deal is that, right? Like employer of record worldwide and so on, valued billions. Alex is the CEO. You can text that guy any day, any night, no matter how small you are, he will reply to you within like 30 seconds. Like it's super, super, super close. I think this is what people call the founder mode now, but ultimately it's about just talking to your customers all the time.
Love it. Any cool stories, example of how company using June have made smarter revenue-driven decision based on product data? Maybe something like, I don't know, improving activation, onboarding, boosting, any other phase we mentioned earlier, or growing key accounts.
Yeah. So I'll give you one recent example. A company called NAC. They're building this kind of like internal admin tool. Very, very cool. A little bit like Retool does for a slightly different market segment. These guys are using us in the success team right now to power their CRM. They're using HubSpot to actually know when their VIP customers are signing up and stuck, and then they will trigger a task in their CRM and in Slack. So literally imagine you're like your CSA agent. There is a channel in Slack called VIP customers. And like once a day or once every 2 days, there will be like a notification that says, June has signed up to ProdCamp. It's the perfect customer for you because we have enriched it. And this is all the criteria you mentioned as being your VIP customers. And now it's been like 5 days that this customer is blocked on not having done the setup, even though they did the onboarding call, like jump on that, right? And then typically someone will put like an emoji reaction on Slack, say, I'm on it. And then, work on the account. And again, there would be a notification further down the line. So that's one thing that has worked really well. Typically what we see companies like NAC, what they do is they will send transactional emails to a lot of people to make sure that there is a baseline of communication going through to push people through their success journey. And then they will do high touch, get white glove support for the people that, are worth the most time, AKA the companies that are going to be the best customers.
Love it. Love it. Really, really interesting. We've built, and we're talking about impact, and we've built ProdCamp with product ROI in mind from the start. We've seen how better feedback management can reignite deals, contribute in reducing churn, sometimes drive expansion, something you already mentioned as well. One client even calculated they have reignited about $250,000 annual recurring revenue over the past years with thanks to ProdCamp. But beyond that, we also discovered that properly managing feedback also aligns expectations, reduce conflict between customers, product teams, and business teams. And that's something we actually didn't really expect. So I was wondering, have you also with June found that product data brings value to areas of the business you didn't expect?
Yeah, we talk about the ROI before this call, I remember, and it was like one of the surprising common discovery. So I've been reflecting a bit on this one, and my hunch is that I think if you build in B2B SaaS and you push it, right, you push it like through the years, and you develop with businesses, and you kind of like expand the things you do and the amount of problems you solve, and you grow with these businesses, I think eventually you will end up on multiple desks within a company. It's kind of like almost unavoidable. And I think, you will just also chase a higher ROI. I think that's pretty simple. Like, there are two ways you can convince a B2B to buy your product, save time or make money,
Right.
or both, right?
Even better.
So I think in your case, it makes sense. Like circulating the feedback is just a best practice. Like all the companies I worked at had the public Slack channels with the feedback pinging, and everyone was added to it, and everyone was expected to read the kind of messages, right? So I think that's a great one. Honestly, for us, it's been a very similar journey. Probably there are less people in the company reading feedback, but there are people checking June
Data. Yeah.
It's slightly more specific, but we've had this horizontalization happening. It's actually the vision of the company. We started at product analytics for B2B SaaS. And so what that means is we aggregate companies using domains, and then we provide B2B specific metrics like expansion, contraction, things you can't get in a traditional product analytics. And then we had this, big decision to make on whether we would go up market and become, a B2B product analytics for large enterprise, or if we could, leverage product data for more people within the company. And so we had this months last year where we said, okay, if we can give product data to other people in the company and become more sticky, generate more revenue, basically do all the things you will to do when you go mid-market, then we can probably start to diversify early in the journey of the company and then go up market a little bit after
later on.
And this is what happened to June. Like we had 25% of our users, active users, being success teams. So we talked with them. We're like, why are you using June? Like, why are you not using another product? This is a product for product teams. And they were like, well, we want to know what people do in the product for our job. And the company bought this product already. So of course we look into it and we're like, that makes sense, right? And then we had the revenue teams joining. They were like, okay, I'm doing sales in my CRM, but I want to know where the account is in, right? So they started to look into June and we're like, okay, what are you trying to achieve? And they told us like, well, I'm trying to shrink product data into a signal that I can then leverage to make money, right? Or like, okay, we're going to do that for you, right? And that's when the kind of the whole CRM integration playbook came in place for us.
And that's exactly leading us very naturally to my next question. So thank you for that amazing transition, Enzo. So exactly when we prepped for this interview, we talked about how critical our CRM's integration for June today, and that's a core part of your strategy. So can you, and you touched on it a couple of times in the conversation, but can you explain why and how does this affect your product strategy today?
Yeah. So I just want to be clear with people listening that what worked for us maybe won't work for others. And so I'm going to really try to go back to the root of why that thing is working for us and what is actually the real learning behind it. So TLDR, we launched some CRM integrations a couple of months ago, meaning you can turn your product data into a signal like active seats, decrease of usage, milestone 1, 2, completed, not completed, things like that. And you can pass it to your CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, Atio to do all kind of like automation on the other end, right? And this is initially was used by sales teams to convert accounts or upsell and renew accounts. And then eventually what's happening right now is that a lot of teams are moving to CRM to do success. And so now we are also powering a lot of success teams there because the CRMs are getting just better at doing success. Plus, it's a clear advantage that you can consolidate your data there. Plus, we're going through a crisis and people try to consolidate a bit their tools.
Consolidate tools, yeah.
So for that reason, we started to become not just tools for product teams and the success teams, but actually a tool to generate revenue. And so this is what made the difference. I could test that with conversation. Like the ROI of June a year ago was you're spending between $500,000 and $1 million a year on a product squad, so on your engineers, designers, and PM. Wouldn't it be great for $2,000, which was the price of June a year, to kind of like help these people know what to look at, what to work on, right? So $500,000 compared to $2,000 to help people understand what to work on, partially, right? Because we discussed that product data is not the only signal, was a pretty good ROI, right? But again, we had the problems like this is also helping you make a decision that then ultimately will bring to a product improvement that then eventually will lead to the outcome, which is more money for your company, right? Now the conversation is very different. The conversation with June now is if, let's say our product costs 5 or 10K a year and your ACV, average contract value, is 5 to 10K, if you activate or retain or renew one account within a year because of June, you're break even. If you do 2, you're printing money. And our customers make a lot more than 2, basically. So it's a totally different conversation for us. And so this is what has changed for us in terms of product strategy. I think we learned that people, like the initial insight of June was people have data, but they struggle to make decision with it. Mm-hmm. I think the current insight of June is people have data, but the only reason they have data is actually to increase the revenue of their company. And so we need to close this gap between the data and the revenue. And so for us, that means being much, much closer to the revenue teams. So in the SaaS, these are sales and marketing people, to be very direct.
Absolutely. Love it. Love this philosophy. And I think this is a great problem,
right? You probably have a similar challenge, right? Yeah,
absolutely similar challenge, and we are looking at things at the exact same way, trying to bridge this gap and increase impact, and impact is the bottom line. It's profitability or revenue, but in both cases, it's still measured as the bottom line in our world. So yeah,
that makes sense.
Great. Thank you so much for this. We getting close to the end, but I have a couple of more questions, so we'll try to get through this one as well. Because we couldn't do a discussion around products without talking about AI and automation. So I wanted to touch quickly on that and share what you think will change in the way company analyze data and feedback, and maybe do you see any potential downsides in using AI to analyze and do this part of the job?
Yeah. So that's a great question, man. So downside, I will lead with that. I think the more computers or do things for humans, the more we become lazy and unaware of the things, right? So yesterday I shared that funny memes on LinkedIn where it's someone trying to code, but he doesn't know how to code, and now he's just begging a ChatGPT to write a proper code because there is a bug and he can't debug it, right? So that's going to be a bit the same. Like if AI helps you do more with your data, and it's a black box, you don't really know how AI does that, then you're going to lose a lot of context, which was important to interpret this information or to fine tune this information, right? So I think that's probably the biggest risk is probably like more humanity risk. Then in terms of like uplift, I think they're huge. I think we are like entering the fourth era of data analysis. So the first era is what I call data exploration, which was you had to search into your data to get something. So this is the old world of SQL, where you would have to form an hypothesis, and then
make a
query, form an hypothesis of what you would have to look at, then find out what are the best ways to visualize this information. Because if you don't, only by visualizing the information the right way, you can see the outliers or things like that. And then you need also the expertise to interpret this information. Like if there is a drop of 20%, but it's Christmas, is it really a drop or just people are with their family? Maybe it's just the family time, right?
Is it really a problem?
Is it really a problem? So this is the old world. The second generation was, I think, what we tried to do when we started June, which was simplification. So our insight was people have data. Most of the startups have data, but they do very little things with that. And so we tried to simplify things. So we built templates. We were, I think it's fair to say that we were the first product analytics company to launch templates. We would try to do really a lot of things out of the box for you. And so we were simplifying things to shorten the path to value so that you don't have to build the expertise anymore. You just have to pick from the template library, like, okay, this is pretty relevant for my business, and you just had it. That was the second generation. Third generation is what we launched last year, June AI. Doing again kind of the very deep exploration, but like with very little skills in a way. Like, and this was asking in English to your database a question. So with June AI, we were, I think, again, the first ones in that space to allow people to ask a question in plain English and be able to give you an answer and a visualization, which was very advanced. So we would do like some very complex queries for you and pick the right visualization. This is really cool because now you can do what an analyst would do within seconds, but you still have a little bit this context and this expertise needed like in the first phase, right? I think where we're going next is a phase where you completely flip the board, where the AI is proactive. So the AI gives you the insights, decides for you what to look at, when to look at it. So for instance, in our case, there is something I like, which is called a feature audit, which is a high-level map of what feature is being used in your product. And that gives you like a really nice high-level directions of, what are your killer features, why people come back, what are things that you might want to cut from your roadmap or just cut from your product, things like that. You don't need to look into a feature audit every day, but every quarter or every 6 months, it's very healthy, right? So in our case, a world where there is an AI analyst at June, which is literally AI, coming back to you every 6 months with a feature audit, update, and analysis, because AI is so good at summarizing things and analyzing things. That is something like just within reach. Actually, something very, very feasible today. And this is, I think, the world we're entering right now. And I'm really excited about this world, to be honest. I think we started this company because we knew people struggle with their data. If technology can accelerate that, then that's great. In fairness, it will take a couple of years till to get there, even though there is acceleration of the intelligence, because there are just so many edge cases and so many gaps to be closed still.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for all this insight and for sharing a couple of stories, and also your vision for June, because I understood that this was also about that and different phases. So that's great, touching on that, also on the CRM strategy. We are getting real close to the end of the interview, so maybe any last word of advice for the B2B SaaS folks out there listening to us?
Yeah, I don't know what I can pretend to know. The more I know, the less I know, actually. So maybe like I'm having lots of good chats with B2Bs recently, and I really feel there is a crisis in the scene, and it's real.
Right.
It's real. And I think in these tough times, my probably biggest learning or biggest piece of advice would be just to recenter yourself on the core market and the core use cases you think you are valuable for. And this is certainly what we've tried to do. And the more we do it, the more we realize it's paying off. And the more I also realize it's never enough, and there is even more focus you can put. So if there are some B2Bs out there that struggle or go through similar pains, I think that would be my most recent insight.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap for today's episode of Excuse My SaaS. A big thanks to you, Enzo, and to June.so for sharing again insight, showing us how product data can truly drive smarter decisions, revenue growth for B2B SaaS companies. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find more info about June.so on their website. And of course, you can connect with Enzo or me on LinkedIn. We'll drop the links in the description if you want to chat more about today's topic. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Excuse My SaaS. Keep discovering, building for impact, and turning data into revenue.